Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
I taste a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Mia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are at a away game in the Grave district. The Pessac-Léognan, aussi? Is it also Pessac-Léognan or is it the Grave?
Pessac-Léognan and Grave.
And Grave.
The Grave region and the appellation of Pessac-Léognan.
Okay, so the sub-region is it. Hey, I want you guys to have a listen to a podcast I did with Paul Warson. Just came out a few weeks ago, and that is because he is the winemaker of an 8-acre vineyard in Bel Air, California, if not known as Beverly Hills. The question is, who makes wine in Beverly Hills? Well, Paul does. So it's a great conversation. As well, there's another episode just came out with Julie Hernandez. Julie walked into my office about 20 years ago. I told myself, this young woman will never make it in this industry. It's too hard. And she became a local executive, one of the largest distributors in California, and she just retired. And it wasn't for her, I think Wine of the Month Club would have been in dire straits to find wine and to make deals in this industry. So listen to that. But not while we're here. We're here to see and have a conversation with Veronique Sanders Van Beck. And she's the director-president of Château Haut-Bailly here in the Grave in the Pessac-Léognan district. But welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
It's so fun because, we met at the tasting at that crazy museum. What was that thing? That Uncle Ben's museum or something?
Brainwash.
Brainwash, that's right. You have better memory. And that was with a Maison Marc Domaine group. And I want to talk about that too a little bit. But more interesting, I just read this morning that you poured wine at a very important dinner at Versailles. And tell me, with President Macron was there. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff.
Yes, this is a beautiful event which is called Choose France. And Mr. Macron invited top leaders around the world who might invest in France or who are investing in France. So it was a dinner for, I think, 300 top businessmen from all around the world. And they choose Haut-Bailly. So choose France, choose Haut-Bailly.
Well, that's right. No, choose France, choose. That's our new slogan, right?
Exactly.
Because that's a pretty impressive accolade that the president of the country would choose Haut-Bailly for that. Did Haut-Bailly always have that distinction in the world of wine, or is that a more current distinction, or is it something that you earn and it takes a long time?
I think Haut-Bailly has a very long history and a beautiful history. It always belonged to very strong personalities. And if you are looking at the great golden age of Haut-Bailly between 1872 and 1940, Haut-Bailly was selling at the same price as the first growers, Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Haut-Brion. And at that time, it was already very much looked after, regarded, considered. More recently, I know that Dominique de Villepin chose Haut-Bailly for a meeting in New York with l'ONU, United, as a beautiful image of a French terroir which belonged to an American. So it was a symbolic wine chosen for this event to show also the friendship between our two countries.
And you gave us the Statue of Liberty. I mean, that's that's a very important thing. No, that's an interesting thought, though, you just said, because I'm here with a large group of friends and cousins and family and clients as well. And, they're learning about the classification of 1855. They're learning about the classification of 1955. And here you're saying, which I thought when Napoleon III, the great nephew, right, of the great general, decided to do the classification, it was really for elevating the popularity of Bordeaux to the world's eye, right, at the fair in Paris. And you were selling at the same price. And I always thought that the original classification was kind of based on the price.
Actually, the classification of the Médoc was done in 1855.
Right.
But don't forget that in Bordeaux, you don't only have one classification, but you have several classifications. You have the one of the Médoc and Sauternes made in 1855 which was supposed to last just the time of the World Exhibition, based on price. But you also have the one of Saint-Emilion, which is more recent, and the one of the classified growth of Grave, which was done one century after, and we belong to that one. And Pomerol doesn't have any classification, although Petrus might be the most famous wine around the world.
So that's an interesting concept, though, because nowhere else in the world, except for maybe Italy, the DOCG and DOC, and that's just not really a ranking, that's just a classification of the appellation, does this exist? And we had a conversation yesterday with Cheval Blanc, Angelouse, and talking about how, and I always have a hard time with when Gaffelière with their Chardonnay, that they've opted out of the classification in Saint-Emilion because it included hospitality, service, hotel options, and they said, we're not going to play that game. Parking, was part of this conversation. Do you think, just personally, that it should be a dynamic
well, the case of Saint-Emilion is special because it's a classification which is reopened every 10 years.
Right.
So if the rules of the game change, I can understand that some of them disagree or want to do differently. In our case, in the Grave, it's very stable and it never reopened. So we are 14 classified growths, with Aubryon being our leadership, our leader, or flagship, I mean. And all the classified growths are based in Pessac, like Aubryon and La Mission Aubryon, and in Léognan, where we are located with Haut-Bailly.
So that's interesting. It leads to this conversation about culture of wine. This group I'm with, we're learning that the French culture is wine. In fact, one of your representatives at Le Pape said, you're almost not French if you don't like wine, which is a cute saying. I mean, that's what she meant. And I thought, that's very different than what the American view of wine is. The American view is you go to Napa Valley, you go up and down the highway, you invest in, you make a lot of money in your career and you buy a winery and you get to live this lifestyle. And it's the next step of a lifestyle instead of in Europe and in France and particularly, it is the lifestyle. You're here every day. You live it, you breathe it, and it takes this passion to do that. And you started with your father.
I started with my grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yes, I think it's more than a lifestyle. It's a mission, and it's something you do by passion and with passion. You can never stop working. You can work 7 days a week and 365 days a year because you always have an eye on what's going on in the field, what the weather is going to be, what are the challenges you're going to have to deal with. So it's a never-ending process. It is also a lifestyle, a beautiful lifestyle. And at Le Pape, you had a little bit of this French art de vivre that we are protecting, having lunch and dinners every day here with beautiful fresh ingredients from the market, matching all the wines we are going to serve at the table. So it is true that we are very privileged, but we are also fully dedicated to our vineyards, and because we do wine not just for today, but we do wine for the next generation, for people who are going to drink it in many, many years and enjoy the fruit of our work.
It doesn't feel like work, does it?
I think if you love your work and if you do it by passion, you never have the feeling you're working.
It's a unique product, though, and I've had a hard time defining this or getting a definition. Maybe there isn't one, because there's no other product. And it hit me this morning. There's no other product in the world that requires it's so slow. You only get one chance a year to do it, and to test what your philosophy is going to be about that vintage. And there's no product that brings people together like this product. Here we are traveling the world with my group, and it's focused on visiting places like Haut-Bailly and learning more about that culture. And I can't think of another product that feels like that. A stylo, a pen doesn't do that. Paper doesn't do that. A semiconductor doesn't do that. My iPhone, I don't gather over my iPhone, but we gather over wine. And I don't know if it's because it's a conduit to the soul or the soil or what.
I think, first of all, wine is part of civilization. Everywhere you have a civilization, you will have wine. It's also, you're mentioning a stylo, it can be yogurt. It's very different from any industrial product, because even if we want to make the best wine as possible every year, at the end of the year, we will do only what is possible to do.
Yes, right.
Because we are dependent from the weather. So nature will decide, or God will decide, of what we are able to do or not. So we just have to adapt permanently. And this adaptation makes our job fascinating, because every year is a new story. Every year we write a new history on the white page, and we learn from scratch every year. Our job changed incredibly in the last 25 years. And you're right. I mean, it's in the end, you are sharing this product with people who love food, who love art, who have many passions. And when you have a great wine on a table, the discussions are always remarkable.
It's pretty amazing. And I thank my father for that. Exposed me to it young. We had a wine shop. I stocked the shelves. I was learning then. And coming on a trip like this and learning more, after 35 years of selling wine, I still learn every time I sit down with people like you to understand more about what we're doing. It sounds like to me, there's a certain humility to what you just said, because you don't get to decide what's going to happen because of the weather, and God gets to tell you what we're going to produce, and you get to do the best you can with it. And that sort of is a humbling experience, right? Unlike the wines we find at the supermarkets that are on a formula. We're going to add so much sugar, so much acid. We're going to make it taste like it did last year. I understand those are important vintages to have for people to get used to wine. But in this case, and in most cases, there's a certain humility required to do this.
I love this word of humility, because you know where it comes from. Humility comes from humus in Latin, and it means earth.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
Yes. So, and all of our work is to look at our vineyard, look at the 90% of our work is outside in the field. And to make a great wine, you do it outside. Then you may have a beautiful cellar with lots of technology at the service of your terroir, but we all are focused on our ground, on our soil and our subsoil, on the plant which is on it, and the many number of hours of work for each plant. So and our soil, our vineyard is low, so it keeps us humble, and humility is really a key word for sure.
It's almost like a privilege. It's almost a privilege to be able to experience that and to manage that and to become part of that culture.
It is a privilege, and it's a mission, because my job would be to transmit it to the next generation. Mm-hmm. We are at the service of our vineyard for few decades. We inherit something from the past. We have to take care of this patrimoine of all vines, and we plant the oldest vines into new vines in order that the next generation can also benefit from something which has been regenerated. And yes, it is a privilege, it's a duty, and it's an honor to serve a terroir like Haut-Bailly.
Is there another generation?
So after, there's always another generation. My son is 15 years old, and the Wilmers family owning it right now. There is the second generation at the head of it right now.
Congratulations, that's great. Yes. I didn't have a generation. I have 3 daughters. They're beautiful daughters, and I told you about one of them. But the wine trade in California on the internet, we're retailers, wholesalers. It's gotten so difficult, managing the internet sales, 50 regulations, 50 states. I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to hand it off. So we got 2 generations under our belt, and then it moved on to another group but I was honored to be part of it. and to participate in it. And you're right, it never leaves you. Like I'm here today because I love talking about it and hearing the philosophy about it, even though I don't sell it every day anymore. I just love learning more and more as I can. So you just got done with En Premier. I think for the listeners, they've probably seen it around on the internet. They probably saw it on LinkedIn. They probably saw it on Facebook or Instagram, that this idea of En Premier, which if you would give an explanation from the winery side of things, what happens during En Premier?
So what happens is that we just showed last month the last baby, the 23 vintage, to the whole world. Everybody came and tasted and made its own opinion. And I think the quality is beautiful about this vintage, and it gave a smile to everyone, and everybody went back home thinking, "Wow, this is another great vintage of Bordeaux."
How many people came through Haut-Bailly?
A few thousand.
Really?
Yes, in few days we welcome more than almost 3,000 people, so that's a lot of people.
That's amazing.
But it's very energetic, you get this energy, and the fact that Bordeaux interests so many people around the world is just fascinating. And it was great to be able to show the level of quality of this vintage. And since few weeks, we have the releases going on. So every day, a few chateaux release their price, and the consumer is able to buy our wines in advance in order to benefit from a good deal. Actually, the wine will be cheaper than what it will be when they'll find it in a few years on the shelves, and they can also choose the format they want to buy. So imagine you have a new baby or a grandchild, or if you get married and you want to get your wine in magnums, double magnum,
Or 9 ounce, 9 pound, 10 ounces.
Exactly. So you can select your format, and that's something you should always do to celebrate later on.
You're sitting here is an honor for me. There's few women in this industry. I was talking to you earlier in the vineyard about, in America, the movement for women in wine is, a real movement. It's got a lot of traction. They're saying that now 25% of the graduates of enology school are women, but in the executive ranks, we're at 7 or 8%, and there's a strong sense of changing that, moving the needle for that. I was very honored. I had an intern, a stagiaire here in my office, and her job was to write the notes for all the podcasts I was doing with young women winemakers. Inspired her to go to school. So she's at Cornell University getting her enology degree today. And I feel good about that. I'm happy to be able to enlighten a young person to the value of a glass of wine. So, but in France, is it a structured movement, or because your position in this company is pretty rare? We can find the right ones. We'll talk about a couple of the historical women in this business, but is it rare right now for somebody in your position as a female?
I think it's a natural movement, and it's more and more women joining the industry in every field. It can be in the vineyard, it can be in the cellar, it can be selling wine, or even managing an estate. So when I had this opportunity more than 25 years ago, it was thanks to the audace of an American, Bob Wilmers, who bought the estate to my family and who trusted a young girl. But that was very new and very audacious at that time. And I always considered that to be a woman was an advantage. You are seated next to the most interesting guys, and then you listen and you learn. So, and today you have more and more women everywhere. I believe also in complementarity. And at Haut-Bailly, what is very interesting is that in the field, we have 50% of men, 50% of women. In the cellar, the same. In the offices, the same. Although I'm against parity, I think you have jobs where men are better, jobs where women are better. But just by luck or by by the belief of complementarity, we are 50-50 everywhere in the company.
Well, it's by skill set, by the fact you can do the job. We don't care. We're just going to hire the best people for the
Exactly.
job. The woman I mentioned earlier when we started the show, it was a true story. She came in to sell me wine. I thought this young lady's never going to make it, and she was very tough. Still a very pleasant young lady, and we have a great relationship post our careers because of this work she did. But I thought, man, this is a dog-eat-dog world. And she tells the story about how difficult the latter rungs were for her career to path where she went. I mean, she really, really worked hard. And I truly believe the success of my company was partially on her back, because she produced for me when I needed her to do. But you wrote in a previous interview, he had the audacity to hire a girl. So we have to give him credit for having audacity right at the same time.
That's very American.
Yes, that's true. But there are women throughout history. I mean, Madame Clicquot was, she was one sharp young woman who created a market for herself in the Russian world of champagne in England, and cutting edge ideas, May-Eliane Lancasson, who we talked about, who was at Pichon Longueville. I mean, unbelievable fortitude. Do you think it takes more fortitude for a woman to accelerate in this industry than it does maybe in France or in England? I mean, compared to the United States? Or
I think it's a natural movement, and things are happening because it should happen. But no, I think in the history of Haut-Bailly, you had amazing women in the 18th century. And not just for a few years, but for 30 years. Mm-hmm. One woman was running Haut-Bailly in a very sharp
Really? At
way.
Haut-Bailly?
Yes. And you also had women taking care of the vineyard during the war. If you're thinking of the war vintages, and yesterday, a great American friend from San Francisco brought back to Haut-Bailly a 1918 bottle that we shared during lunch, and that was so moving.
Wow.
Because last year of the First World War, and the wine, 106 years old, was speaking. It was alive. It was just a bubble of incredible
amazing.
aromas, and the wine was telling a story, and the bottle, which has been traveling the world during maybe a century, was just coming back here. That was quite an adventure also at the beginning of the week this week.
That is really fun.
Yeah.
Well, you think about that kind of goes back to the earlier conversation about, what is so special about wine. Here we're celebrating the homecoming of an old vintage.
And the wine was probably made by women.
Yeah. Oh, really? So
of course.
Wow.
At the end of the First World War, you didn't have many men left,
So the history of Haut-Bailly goes back to where?
The history of Haut-Bailly goes back to probably 800 years, because it's very difficult to find written proofs of the existence of vines before 13-something, but we have found lots of written documents showing us what was Haut-Bailly from the 13th, 14th century. Before that, we know the vines were existing, but we don't know exactly to who it belonged, etc. So it's a Parisian banker called Firmin Le Bailly, who fell in love with the existing vines and gave his name to the estate in 1630. And since 1630, the estate stayed the same superficie, which is very unique in Bordeaux.
Wow.
And then you had always very charismatic owners, strong personalities. In the 18th century, you even had the mayor of Bordeaux, Mr. Laforest de Montbadon. And then came an incredible man called Alcide Belot des Minières. He was the hero of a novel called Herlot des Grandières, and his nickname was the King of Vintners. And he bought Haut-Bailly in 1872. He built this house, which is completely 19th century, and he planted the vineyard with his own recipe, a field blend, having 1/6 of Merlot, 1/12 of Merlot, 1/12 of Cabernet Franc, 1/12 of Petit Verdot, same thing of Carmenère and Malbec, and 7/12 of Cabernet Sauvignon. And we still have what he planted 120 years ago.
That's amazing.
Yes.
And so the real field blend. I mean, at that time, he was probably picking at the same time and crushing all together and making...
Yes.
It's pretty unusual these days.
Well, no, actually, it was the way Bordeaux was doing the blend wines at that time.
Really?
And we all forgot that, but the blend was done in the field. So it's actually one of the last plots around Bordeaux, which is still done in that way.
And so you don't, we were talking about it outside, you now try to pick the varietals at different points of ripeness so that each cluster is ripe, depending on what grape it is. But there's something interesting that hit me when you were discussing that, and that is, even though you're picking them at different times, and so it might look like it's just another plot, there has to be some kind of value to the idea that these vines are growing with each other. Even though they're different grapes, there's an influence between them that would change those grapes than if they were on their own.
There is two things. There is, I think, the complexity it brings by the fact that it's planted together. And there is something happening which definitely brings complexity. And there is the fact that they are very old. And what is fascinating with this very old vineyard is that they are able to handle everything. They don't have disease. They always produce regularly.
Wow.
They don't produce very much, but they are so consistent.
Wow.
They are always responding. How do you say that? Delivering, sorry.
Yes.
Yes. So it's quite fascinating to see that those old vines have a strength and a power, which is just incredible. And the wine we get from those vines is just so full, so complete, so intense, very deep. So it's the heart of our blend every single year.
So you start with those, that plot. How many hectares is the field blend?
4.
So about 10 acres. You start with that as the basic part of your cuvee, and then you add and subtract from that to create.
Well, it's so intense and complex that on its own, it's almost too powerful.
Really?
So
Wow.
you have to add, and that the fascinating thing of making a blend is like being a perfumer and
Yeah.
you create something and you take 10% of that, which will add a little bit of lightness, 10% of that, which will bring the floral aspect of the wine. And then you build it all about to keep the same style. And that is something which is very dear to Haut-Bailly, is that we never follow the fashion. We never go in too many different roads, but we always try to keep our style, because fashion change, but style lasts.
Oh, I like that. Fashion changes, but style lasts. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to put that down. Because, and that's part of the conversation, but before we get there, and I wrote it down so I don't forget, the complexity of your wines is not overshadowed by the fact that the complexity of running this organization. In other words, we have this wonderful product. It's so romantic. We put it in the bottle and we share it and we converse over it. We taste the 1918 and we fall in love again. But that takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of moving parts to doing this. Here we are in this wonderful chateau. You've got a tasting room. I saw a group go in. We have our tasting after this. You've got a cellar. I mean, these are a lot of moving parts. How does one manage that? And leading to this, you said there was an intellectual complexity that you learned at school that allowed you to be able to step in and do this role. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think to run a place like that, you need diverse competence. You need to be able to understand what's going on in the field, and also understand how the weather works.
Yes.
You need to know how to vinify a wine. You need to have a certain charisma to lead a team and make them give the best of themselves every single day, because the great strength of Haut-Bailly is a wonderful team, working by passion, at everywhere. And I'm very, very proud of our team. But you also need to be able to meet people from all over the world. We are selling our wine in 80 different countries.
Wow.
So happy to see American friends, but we also have people coming from Asia, from England, from all over Europe. And that the fascinating thing is that we are able to travel and meet great people. So the way I'm running this company is that I believe in the collective competence, and everybody brings things, and we are permanently analyzing what we are doing, and we are always doubting, how can we do better? How can we go further, higher, faster, because the world is changing, our environment is changing, and you should not keep or stay on set recipes. You have to adapt permanently. We also believe in the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, the permanent evolution, adaptation. And that's extremely important. And that's the way you're making great wines, because if you have in mind the way you're going to cook next time with certain product, or your way you're going to harvest, you're wrong. Yeah. Because things are changing around you. So you have to have a fresh mentality, a fresh spirit, and invent, create every day.
That's the humility of it all, isn't it? That you have to, your ideas in the future are already wrong before you start them, right?
Exactly. Yes.
But that's you said it very eloquently and very articulate. You articulated that concept very well. It's easier said than done. We have people involved, which is always an issue. You've got the weather, you've got all the different pieces that are moving, and you have to be able to balance those. And you went to Sorbonne, you studied nothing that dealt with wine, and maybe that's the value of your education.
Later, I studied wine later.
Later, yeah. So you studied economics, and so you have a bird's eye view of some of this that's going on. And this is a part of the wine business that frustrates me. I wish it was a product that transcended profit, and that we only got to make the things that we are expressing exactly what we can express. But we are in a business. The Audeny Group out of the Rhone Valley. It's fine wine think tank. Nicole Rollet, I think, is the president. And I had that conversation with them, and it's like the consumer has always driven the wine business. Let's take Madame Clicquot. She made a slightly sweeter cuvée for the Russians than she did for the English, that kind of thing. And that's obviously very important. But when you talk about style is permanent and fashion comes and goes. Are we talking about this, the makeup of the wine, let's say the sugar content? Are we talking about how we market the wine when we're trying to evolve the business? Are we maintaining a very straight focus on the best wine we can make from the terroir, and then the innovation comes in getting it to the customer, or is the innovation in figuring out what the customer wants?
I think you have to respect your terroir first, and to give the chance to the terroir to express itself. Because what is extremely important more than anything is the identity. If you lose your identity, you lose your customer. Why do people drink Haut-Bailly? It's because they love the style of elegance, fine tannins, very silky tannins, nothing aggressive, something which is built to last forever. So the longevity of the wine. And if you are not true or respectful to your own identity, you lose it. You lose your customers. So it's very important both to respect your terroir and to keep your style.
Wow, that's complicated. Respect it, but keep your style, so that, and I've learned this more. I've gotten closer to understanding this because of this trip only, and that is you've got to keep that steady eye on what Haut-Bailly is and what it means to the consumer. And the consumer, and this is my true belief in the wine business, comes to Haut-Bailly and learns and then understands it. Not that we decide to make something we think they're going to like.
Yes, because also we are making wine for today. We have to make the best wine we can do today with the technology of today, the weather of today, with the terroir we cherish. But most of our wines will be drunk in 10, 15, 20, 50 years. So if you are trying to follow the taste of the consumer of today, you're wrong. You're completely wrong.
You're already wrong.
Haut-Bailly is above that. The top wines of Bordeaux are above following the consumer. We have to think further and for the long term.
I think as such a refreshing, and I'm not going to say that the American wine industry is not doing that as well. There's certainly vineyards in Napa, Sonoma, Central Coast that follow that philosophy. It has to be. But at the same time, the most popular wines in the industry are these sort of formula wines. They follow some kind of structure of a palatable character, a consumer-driven palate. And it's fine. I think we need those to bring people to wine that otherwise weren't drinking wine. But it ebbs and flows because...
By experience, I know when a wine is great, it makes unanimity. I can tell you, when you have a great wine, usually there is a silence around the table because there is emotion. And this emotion is created by the fact you just did the best you can do. You have a great terroir, you respect it, and then you deliver an amazing wine. And it always makes unanimity.
That's so fun. But do you think that's part of the aristocracy of wine and the people that, and it's a very important part of the consumerism is everybody looks at wine, particularly haute wine, that, oh, you guys are snobs. You say words that we don't understand. And I don't understand when you say, cedar box and leather. Sometimes I think we propagate our own aristocracy around the wine industry. But on the flip side, that's what it's about. It's the understanding of this complexity and saying, wow, I may not be able to define it yet, but man, I sure taste it.
Yeah, I think what is the most important thing is, do I love it or not? Does it speak to me or not?
Right.
When I'm tasting a 1918 or at the beginning of my career, I had in Miami, an American collector served me in a blind tasting Haut-Bailly 64 from Magnum.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know what it was, but I put my nose in the glass and I knew I was at home. And then I had the feeling my great-grandfather was talking to me, although he was already not anymore on this planet.
That's really cool.
And then I had the feeling I was transported into space. So it's about an emotion, and a great wine provides an emotion. It can just make you think of something you had this year. It can just provide a moment where you feel, wow, this is a unique moment. So happy to be here, with my family, my friends, and this wine is bringing something more, to the conversation, to the spirit.
Experiential. Well, we were in Paris I think it was about 10 years ago, and just a regular tourist cafe. I ordered the quiche, and they put it in front of me, and my wife looked at me. She goes, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "This took me back 40 years. Because my mother was a very good cook, and she made the same style of quiche. And I just took one smell, and I go, I haven't smelled this since my childhood. And wine does that all the time if you have a proper glass of wine.
Yes. And we should educate young people.
Yes.
To drink together, to share, to remember that when they open the bottle and you're not there anymore, they will think of you.
That's right.
Because that's the way, if you keep talking about people and having something in common through the wine, that keeps a memory alive,
I taught my son-in-laws about champagne in Haut-Bailly, and now it's costing me too much money. But, there's a conversation, too, that's going on the internet about the language of wine and, innovation in wine. And I don't mean innovation in how we manufacture, because everything you do here is to produce the best product you can from what you're given. I think the innovation they're talking about is either marketing or consumerism, and then the language. And I had an interesting conversation with Monsieur Clouet from Cheval Blanc, and that was, your father and my father described wines differently than we do today. And Michael Broadbent described wines in his generation different than we do today, and maybe Harry Waugh, and then you just keep going backwards to know that maybe that's what they mean, because I still have yet to understand what changing the language of wine means. Because if we change it to something else, then somebody else isn't going to understand it either. So I'm not sure. follow this or heard people talking about changing the language of wine?
Yes, but before that, the taste of wine changed.
Well, that's true too.
The wines my great-grandfather did is not the wine we are doing today. There is always the identity of the estate, which is there, but we are working in a very different way. And I remember when my grandfather tasted 2005, he told me, God, this is probably the best wine we ever made. And I said, come on, you did beautiful vintages like 61, 64, and so many others, 89, 90. And he said, yes, but nature gave it to us all. And today you have nature, but you have the way you're working with, so much care, precision, technology, that help you do wines which are just spectacular. And it is true that in Bordeaux, we did a series of more than 20 vintages, which are just exceptional. So the taste of wine is also changing. And all of our jobs change incredibly in the last 20 years. We just welcomed a few months ago our first robot in the vines. And the new cellar we have is a concentrate of innovation at the service of tradition. And you're right, in distribution, marketing, everything, we have so many more ways of talking to people who love wine and who love our wine. It's fascinating, but it's at every step that things are changing and changing in a very fast way.
Very fast. Like I told you, my business relied on the internet to sell wine, which we did for my first website was in 1997. I sent 33 million emails in 2022. So just to sell, and my wines were $15 to $18. They weren't expensive wine. And so I'm trying to figure out when they talk about innovation, you're innovating on the processing side and the experiential side. We're almost out of time. It's unbelievable. But I'm not sure what they mean by innovation in that I guess I don't, like, for instance, I don't think putting your camera on a bottle of 19 Crimes and getting a moving character is innovation in the wine business. That's just sizzle marketing stuff. I mean, who cares about that? But the idea of innovation, maybe they mean what you're doing. So I'm not getting anywhere with this part of the conversation because I'm not sure what they mean by this. Because I think wine is such a romantic and experiential product, and maybe I'll just move into that. Because of my experience on the internet, and because the internet has created bargain shoppers. Now, let's say I know I want Haut-Bailly 2005 because of this conversation. I can go to the internet and buy it, right? But that's not the experience of the Haut-Bailly. That's because of the price. But if I really think the wine business is going back to those days. My father was the president of a Les Amis de Vin chapter in California, and they had dinners. They exposed the people to wine in its infancy in California in the 70s when we just started, so to speak. And I really believe from a marketing standpoint, what you do, which is traveling the world, going to the different expos, pouring the glasses. I mean, it's shocking you were in LA pouring your own wines, is really going backwards to the days of, I had this experience with Veronique. That's an important part of my appreciation for the brand. Do you sense that?
I love that, actually. I love to be close to people who will buy and drink our wine, because it's fabulous to be here at Haut-Bailly alone in your vineyard or trying to best the best wine ever for the generation to come. But when you have the opportunity to meet the people who love what you're doing, to exchange about it, to share the passion, I think it's great. I love it. It's a reward.
That's a great way to look at it. I think it's critical now, because the wine industry is in a bad place generally worldwide. I'm very happy you had a wonderful en premier, because people came and you experienced it. There are other wineries in this region that didn't have such success during the en premier, but in general, wine consumption is down. The millennials don't do it as much. The Gen Zs, nobody knows what they're doing. They're drinking. What I don't understand about those people is they talk about organic and biodynamic, and they want fresh food, and they go to Whole Foods, and they go to these markets, but then they drink stuff like White Claw, which is full of artificial ingredients and bubbly, merde.
Yes.
So
The way we make wine in France is that you have a rule, and rule number one is that everything is forbidden. You can't irrigate, you can't protect your vines, you can't add anything in your wine. So that's a very important
is that
thing.
Bon de France? I mean, all of France?
All over France, we respect the character of the appellation d'origine contrôlée. So if you are not respecting it, you are declassified. So that's something to keep in mind when you make wine tastings with wine from other wine regions in the world. It's a very different way of cultivating and producing.
It's interesting that you said that because this group we're with today, obviously we live in California. There's very popular brands, and many entry-level consumers will buy those brands because of their popularity, and they may be a sense of aristocracy if you have one of these brands. But now they're tasting structured, complex, terroir-driven wines ever since we started on the right bank. And the comment was made last night at dinner at Le Pape, which was, I'm starting to understand this idea of acid fruit and sensing the terroir. And we had a wine yesterday at the La Lande de Pomerol, and the gentleman said there's iron ore in the ground that's creating this character. And all of a sudden you go, bing, I get it now. That flavor makes sense what I'm tasting. So it's fascinating. But can you believe it? We're at 48 minutes already. And we have to... I hope we can do this again. We haven't even touched on, look, I got 3 pages more notes to go over. But it's been a fascinating time to sit with you and have this understanding of Haut-Bailly and your career and the things that it takes to be, I'm not going to say successful, to be recognized in this industry. It's not easy to do.
Well, thank you, Paul. I enjoyed speaking with you, and always a pleasure.
Cheers. Are you coming to LA soon? I know you got a lot of travel ahead of you, but...
Yes, for sure. In the coming months, I always loved LA.
With MMD or?
MMD or just to show Haut-Bailly for a few tastings.
I hope we stay in touch and we can regroup.
With great pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.